So the Gemara in Makos in Daf Yud Aleph Amud Beis. So the Gemara says, Amar Yehuda Amar Rav Nidoy al Tanai Tzarech Hafara. If someone is cursed, even if the curse is done on condition, it requires hafara. It requires it should be undone. It should be formally undone. So what does this mean? What's the context that the Gemara is referring to? Mi Yehuda. We learn this from Yehuda, like the son of Yaakov. Tichsiv im lo avi osiv elecha v'chatasi lecha kol hayamim. Yehuda, right? So Yaakov is reluctant to send Binyamin down with the brothers down to Egypt to get food because he's afraid that just like his older brother was lost, so too Binyamin will get lost on the way. So he doesn't want to send him. So Yehuda says, entrust him with me, and if I don't return him, I will be in sin to you perpetually forever. So he's basically he's placing a curse on himself. Now that curse was never formally undone. Yaakov never exempted him from that curse. Now what's really being alluded to here is that Yehuda is in a perpetual state of guilt for 20 years because of his involvement with the original Yosef thing. Like that's what goes around comes around. Also for the individual, meaning he the first time around was responsible for the sale of for the lost brother. So now he's going to be being held account for the potential for the next brother as well. In the blessing that Moshe Rabbeinu gives to the Shvatim on the day of his death, so first he gives a blessing to Reuven, and then the next Shevet that he gives a blessing to is to Yehuda. So it's a very quick segue from the blessing of Reuven to the blessing of Yehuda. It says Yechir Reuven ba'al Yamos. Reuven will live and not die. V'zos liYehuda, and so too will be for Yehuda. So the Gemara says, Kol osam shana shahayu Yisrael b'midbar. The entire 40 years that the Jewish people were in the desert, Atzmosav shel Yehuda hayu megulgolim ba'aram. All of the Shvatim were taken with the Jewish people in the Midbar in order to be buried in the land of Israel. So there was like this perpetual lack of rest that Yehuda experienced, and was even expressed in the very bones of Yehuda, in his aron, in the coffin. Ad she'amad Moshe ubikesh olav rachamim, until Moshe came and requested mercy for him and prayed for him. Amar lefanav Ribbono shel olam, mi garam l'Reuven sheyodeh. Yehuda, who was the inspiration for Reuven to do tshuva for his sin, referring to the mixing up of the beds of his father, that Reuven inserted himself into the private affairs between his father and his different wives. So Reuven had to take an accounting for that. So who was the inspiration for Reuven to do this, to do tshuva for this? Yehuda, because Yehuda also had an incident, a very embarrassing incident, much more embarrassing than that, right? His relationship with Tamar, which was his own daughter-in-law, and he confessed, he came clean for that. So when Reuven saw that Yehuda confessed, so Reuven also confessed. So v'zos liYehuda. So this is what Moshe is alluding to, that the blessing for Reuven should be for Yehuda, because Yehuda was the inspiration for Reuven to do tshuva to begin with. So what is the continuation of this blessing of Yehuda? Shema Hashem kol Yehuda, that God will hear the voice of Yehuda. Ve'el amo tivienu, and he will be brought back into the fold of his nation. Yodav ravlo, his hands will be very strong in battle. Ve'ezer mitzarav tiyeh, and he will have help to defeat his enemies. That's the blessing of Yehuda. That's what we read on Simchas Torah. So the Gemara darshans. Shema Hashem kol Yehuda, all evarei l'shafa. His limbs were gathered in together and made peaceful again. There wasn't this wasn't the perpetual tension that was felt in the limbs of Yehuda was put to rest. Lo hava ka'ayel ma'ilele lemasifta derakia. But still, Yehuda was not given entry into the Beit Midrash in heaven. Meaning he was granted rest, but his soul wasn't yet allowed into the Beit Midrash in heaven. The El Amo Tivianu, when Moshe added the next clause of the blessing that he should be gathered into his people, so he was brought into. So he was allowed into the Beit Midrash. That's what it means, El Amo Tivianu, that he will be brought into the fold of his nation being into the Beit Midrash of heaven. Yodav Rav Lo, that his hands will be mighty, right? Yoda lemishkal ulemitrach b'shmata. He was able to participate in the debates that were going on in the yeshiva Shel Mala. Okay, the Ezer mitzarav tiyeh lefaruke kushya. Right, he was now able to answer all the questions that people asked on his position. Meaning, he was standing in the yeshiva giving a Dvar Torah. People would ask questions on him. He was able to defend himself, so to speak. Right. So, the point of this, the reason that I'm bringing this, is because this is a very interesting source where Chazal are clearly equating the experience of war, because the pshat of these verses is talking about war. Okay. And they're saying that symbolically, what's lying underneath the surface here is really a reference to engaging in Torah study, in the pursuit of wisdom. And not even the pursuit of wisdom that we have in our context, which is already very spiritual, but in the supernal worlds, in like the Beit Midrash Shel Mala, right, the heavenly Beit Midrash. So it's like the highest pursuit of wisdom in its most ethereal, abstract, and enlightened form is equated with war. Yadav Ravlo, his hands will be mighty in war. The Ezer Mitzarav Tiyeh, and he will be saved from his enemies. So this same dynamic of success in war is really the experience of success in pursuit of supernal wisdom. Yeah, Chazal have a term called Milchamta Shel Torah, the war of Torah, which is a very interesting term. Right? Milchamta Shel Torah, throughout Shas. There's a term there's a euphemism that the Amoraim used to describe their students called the Baalei Tresim, which literally means the shield bearers. The shield bearers. That's what they would. There was a euphemism that was used to refer to students of higher learning. In the Gemara in Tanis and Daf Zayin, so the Gemara quotes the pasuk from Sefer Mishlei in Perek Chaf Zayin. Perek Chaf Zayin. Yes, Perek Chaf Zayin. Barzel bebarzel yachad. Steel on steel together. V'ish yachad pnei re'ehu. So too, a man facing the face of his friend. So, what is this saying? In the same way that clashing swords, clashing iron, will sharpen each other, so too, two friends facing each other in dialogue will also sharpen each other. The Gemara says this is referring to two, right? Shnayim sheyoshvim ba'oskim b'Torah. That's the primary context of this. The Bereshis Rabbi, by the way, in Parshas Vayetze, says that the first encounter of barzel b'barzel, iron on iron, was with Yaakov Avinu and God. Cain ish pnei re'ehu, right? A man to his friend, Yaakov facing God. That the encounter between God and Yaakov was this clash. The first encounter was his initial vision with the ladder when he was running away from his brother. And then later on, when he's returning home, he has an actual battle with this divine-like being. This was the experience of Yaakov Avinu. Barzel b'barzel, Cain ish pnei re'ehu. That there's clashing swords that sharpen each other. They sharpen each other because of the clash. So again, we're bringing this in order to highlight this idea that there is this energy that is associated explicitly, not just associated, but it is embodied in the context of war and conflict, which is the very dynamic of what's taking place in the context of pursuing supernal wisdom. And this is a very powerful theme, and this is something this is the underlying everything that Rav Kook is going to be talking about in Os Zion. This is really fascinating. This Os Zion was very fascinating. There were some harot over here that I came across that were very, very unique. So let's just jump in. When as the life forces are coming into actuality, kfarabu nigdam hamonim v'hamafriim. Already in place are the things that are impeding them, monea, impeding them, umafriim, and disrupting them. Hayichushim hameduyakim hem kol kach meshureim umechuvanim. All of the senses are so calibrated and concentrated at shekol hafra'a kala shel eze yachas ve'erech kvar hi ma'akevet. Even small, minute things are able to be an impediment. So what are we saying here? What's another way of saying this? That right, this is what they call this is what they call in cosmology. I'm forgetting the exact language. Something the fine-tuned theory, I believe it's called. Basically, the conditions for the universe to exist. Forget life. That's a whole other level of complexity. But just that the physical laws of the universe, just that the physical universe can exist, there's a tremendous amount of fine-tuning that's required so that the universe basically won't collapse on itself. Yeah, just one example, right? The distance between planets and the thing that they're orbiting around has to be so incredibly fine-tuned, because if it's too distant, it will just be flung into outer space, and if it's too close, it will eventually draw too close to what it's orbiting around and collapse into it. In other words, if the Earth has to be perfectly distant from the sun, so that it can evolve around the sun. If it's too far away, the Earth will just be flung into outer space. And if it's too close, it will eventually just be sucked in by the gravity of the sun and be crushed. So it's like the perfect fine-tuned calibration. And with life, we see this in a higher level of complexity, that we, as human beings, exist in a very, very narrow range of conditions. Like if we go out of those range of conditions, like the person can die very quickly. Temperature-wise, we basically exist, with a very small spectrum of temperature, of known temperature. Even in the world, temperatures in the world on planet Earth that are not sustainable for life. With nutrition, if we don't have, we have a very brief window. We need to maintain that nutrition. So these things are very fine-tuned. What he's saying is that when the life comes into play, everything is so, the rigidity, it makes demands for what is required to maintain life. So because those demands are so high, anything can obstruct that very easily and can cause hafra'ot, it can cause disruption. So basically, there are all these forces that can cause disruption of life now. Because the life forces have come into their own, and there's many, many things that can disrupt it. I'm trying to make sure that I'm still recording over here. The screen closed on me. Yeah, okay, good. Al-Kain, so therefore, Tzarich HaZayin Lavo. For this reason, the Zayin must come, the letter Zayin. HaKelim Shahamilchama Ne'eseret Al Yadam Neged Kol Mafriya. These are the tools that war is done, that go against, that make conflict against all of these mafri'im, all of these things that cause disruption. Neged Kol Oyev U'Mitnakem, against all enemies and all those who, like Nakamaz, those who seek revenge. Hanitzachon HaMilchamti, the victory in war, Hisharut HaChayim B'Tzivyonam, is bringing life back to their proper, stable state. Lamrot Kol Hamon Mafriyem, despite the fact that there are many forces that are trying to disrupt it. Einenu Lakuach Mehayud HaEchutit. Right? The Zayin is not taken from the Yud of the realm of quality, Bihit Pashtuta Ke'erech HaVav, which is drawn down in the matter of the Vav. We spoke about this in the Vav. I mean, even before the Vav, we began speaking about this. How the drawing down of the longer letters is always discussing this theme of drawing down from a more supernal and abstract place to a more concretized place. So what's the difference between the drawing down of the Vav and the drawing down of the Zayin? Is only a very, very minute difference. The Vav is that there's a thick line that's drawn from the side of the Vav down, which, if you remember from 2 days ago when we were talking about Vav, so that has the connotation of measurement, and it's dealing with calibrating the material world. Right? It's coming down into a worldly context. Right? It's coming down into a more material, let's say, crass and more materialized, concretized context. That is not the case with the Zayin. Why not? Because the Zayin, right, as opposed to the Vav, which has a thick line, which is just a straight emanation down from the top, the Zayin is not a thick line. It's the top, which represents the Yud, right, that top square you can see in the picture over here. It's that top square, which represents the Yud, okay, the abstract source, and then it's attached by a small thin line to the part that protrudes down. As we've talked about in other letters for Rav Kook, even the thickness of the letters already speaks to a lot. We spoke about this in Os Beis, where the two horizontal lines of the Beis are thick, whereas the vertical line that connects them on the left side is thin, and that has significance. Right? So similarly over here, where the Vav is elongated, the entire thing is thick, which connotes, again, going down into the thickness, more concretization of the material world. The Zayin is connected by a thinner point to its root. Sorry?
The Yud HaEchios, what's that?
Echos is quality.
What's that? I don't.
Like so it's the realm of quality as opposed to the realm of quantity. Like quality is more abstract. It's not something that could be. It's not something that could be measured in material terms.
It seems like he's mentioning it the way that he expects that we've already talked about it.
Yeah. Yes. We've talked about it a few times. We spoke about it already. We started talking about it. We started talking about this in Os Aleph, if I'm not mistaken. That the domain of quality is a more abstract domain, meaning it's fundamentally tied with meaning, right? Meaning and significance, which is not something that's measured in a material. Like you can't measure quality with a ruler or with a scale. Quality is something more abstract. It's meaning, right? It's meaning and significance. Whereas quantity, it can also be measured, right? But it's something much more concrete. So quality and quantity, there are two domains of measuring something, but they're fundamentally distinct. One is more spiritual and ethereal, right? Meaning oriented, and one is more concrete and material. It's more it's more physical oriented.
And the Yud of that is the beginning of that.
So he's saying in this context, the Yud represents it represents the abstract echut, the abstract quality.
The abstract concept of quality.
Correct. So the drawing down from that domain of quality, down, so to speak, into the realm of the material, whereas by the Vav, it's just a thick continuity of that top point, okay, which as we talked about 2 days ago, it's more in the domain of the concrete. Whereas the Zayin is not that. Rather, what is it? He's saying lo tachin et haneshek, because the hitpashtut, the spreading out in the manner that the vav spreads out, is not going to provide proper weaponry. Lo tachin et haneshek. It is not going to provide adequate weaponry. Et hakoach lechalot et hamafriya, that will be adequate enough to destroy the enemy. Ki im mehayesod haechuti habilti mitpashet, from the foundation of quality that doesn't spread out into the domain of the crass, thick, concrete quantity. Hamuromam betochuno, it is very lofty in its nature. Keshuhula atzmo, and it has a certain distinctness. It's still aloof, meaning it hasn't descended completely into the world. It maintains its transcendence. Shemimenu mushkafahi hazarut shel kol ra. Excuse me, did I read that correctly? Mushkafahi hahizarut shel kol ra. Correct. That from that place of being separate from the world, it is able to identify the zarut, the foreignness of all evil. That's a very powerful statement. That the ability to identify evil as evil and have moral clarity, as we would say, to have moral clarity that evil is in fact evil, requires the person to be a little bit separated from the material world. Like if a person becomes too crass and he identifies too strongly with his material surroundings, so the moral clarity begins to become very gray. There's a certain loftiness that needs to be maintained. To the extent that a person associates his consciousness with spiritual matters, the more moral clarity that he'll have. I don't think he's saying necessarily that his moral clarity will be correct, but the very idea that there is good and there is evil, like that very distinction, is a function of the spiritual side of a person. Once a person starts associating, identifies it as a material, physical being, so that moral clarity begins to be like, and it's subjective, it's like, what? Relative, right? Exactly. The more relativism. That's a That's a function of becoming too associated with materiality. Mitoch merkazo yibaneh hazayin et ma'arachot binyano, which is also right. It's the same. This very idea is alluded to in the fact, says Rav Kook, that the line emanates from the center of the yud as opposed to the side of the yud. Right. The side. And we've talked about this also. The sides of things are always alluding to, in one way or another, to the periphery of a thing, whereas opposed to the center, something emanates from the center of the thing. It means that it's more, right? It's more centered. It's more balanced. It's more authentic. It's more authentic, right? It's kind of, right? It has a more powerful sense of authentic self. This power of fighting, of doing battle, hi ba'atzma gamkein tchuna mechalkelet v'zana. This really blew my mind when I read it. If you think about, we're going to unpack this. This very aspect of fighting and doing war is the very attribute also of mechalkelet, of providing sustenance, v'zana, and nutrition. Notenet mechaya l'chol ha'arachim. It gives michya, like the blessing ala michya, on sustenance. It gives the sustenance to all of the aspects of the world. Hatzrichim liot metuchnanim levinyan olamim, that require strengthening in order to build the worlds. V'chol toldayim, and produce all their generations. There are two words in Lashon HaKodesh that connote sustenance. Think about this. This is going to blow your minds. Okay, the shoresh lamed ches mem in Lashon HaKodesh. Lamed ches mem. That has two distinct meanings. What are the two distinct meanings? War and bread. There's another shorosh in Lashon HaKodesh, Zayin Nun, that has two distinct meanings. What does it have? What are the two? Like Hazan es ha'olam kulo b'tuvo, he sustains the worlds, he provides them sustenance. Klei Zayin means weapons. This is unbelievable. Right? The two primary words that connote food and sustenance also are words associated with violence and war. It's very powerful. And what he's saying is that these are you see, I thought what he was saying when the first time I read this, I thought what he was saying is that they come from the same source. I don't think that's what it's saying. It's more like they're two sides of the same coin. Because just like sustenance is giving the most fun, it's providing the life force of the thing. Without sustenance, we don't continue going. You have sustenance in order to keep the most foundational elements of our life force going. That's what sustenance is. The power for war, again, he's defining what war is. When there are forces that are coming to be mafriya, to disrupt life, there are forces that are out there that disrupt life. That's just a fact of the world. Those forces come, the ability to push them away. That's milchama in its most basic sense. The ability to do that also comes from the deepest will of life that the organism has. And you see this in nature. You see this in nature that the strongest and usually these two things are connected. The power of war and aggression in nature is the same power that's seeking food. Sometimes they're literally the same thing, right? Why are lions and tigers and bears, oh my, so aggressive? Because they need that aggression in order to get food. That's why they do it, right? And even the animals that we would think are more docile and aren't carnivorous, right? They're not predators. They still are able to muster up tremendous aggression when things are coming to be la'afriya, to disrupt their life force. But even at the human level, the level of human consciousness, we can relate to this. And this is, the level of appropriateness to what we're experiencing now can't be overstated. That when something comes that is mafriya kochos achayim, that is coming to disrupt the life force, it awakens the deepest recesses of the will to life. It just awakens it. Well, really, there are two options. Either it will crush that life force. That's one option, and unfortunately, we see that does happen in the world. But the other option is that it will awaken with full vigor the deepest inner recesses of the will to life, which is a tremendous power. It's like the most basic, primal yearning to live. It awakens that. Okay? So let's just read a few lines from the commentary over here. And then I will show you another fascinating thing that will blow your minds. It's unbelievable. It blew my mind when I realized this as I was preparing this. So, the first point of neshek and milchama, right? The elements of war and fighting itself. Havav horidat shefa hatov el hametziut. The vav brings down the vav we spoke about 2 days ago. One of the ideas there is that it's bringing down the shefa, the outpouring of divine energy, so to speak, bringing it down and making it more concrete. And part of that experience of making things more concrete is that there are kochot hara, forces of evil being forces that are seeking to disrupt life. They're seeking to disrupt life. Milchamet hatov bara kolet milchama neged mafrim gdolim ktanim keechad umatorata yishmirat ichut hachayim. Right, the purpose of war, in its most basic sense, and I think that's a very good definition of a just war. It's trying to eliminate the forces that are seeking to disrupt life. Now, forces that are seeking to disrupt life, and that's what is being awakened. Hazayin niyatzeget, as he says very nicely over here, Hazayin niyatzeget gam et hasheifa shel hayitzurim lachem lekiyumam lisardutam. It embodies the yearning and aspiration of all life to fight for its own existence. Right? And that can either be crushed or it can be awakened. Yeah. So one last line from the last paragraph over here. Sorry.
The war opens, crushes or awakens.
No, I'm saying those kochot hamafriim, as he says, those forces that are trying to disrupt life. They can either cause the organism to collapse in on itself, like essentially giving up, right? It can do that, or it can awaken, right? It can awaken the will to life, which expresses itself in lechima, in fighting.
It seems like it's flight.
Fight or flight.
You're saying that the flight would be the shutting down, and the fight would be the.
One of the nations anticipating that Jewish people were going to come in and disrupt their life left before, right?
Right. So the Gemara in Sanhedrin says that Yehoshua sent messengers to the kings of Canaan and told them, he says, like, there are three options: either you'll fight us, or you can leave, or you can make peace with us. So there were some that chose to make. There were a few that chose to make peace. The Girgashi, the Gemara says the Girgashi decided to leave, which is very interesting if you think about it. Like they didn't even take the option of making peace. They're like, we're just going to leave, and the vast majority decided to fight. So yes, is it fight or flight? I don't know. I think what I'm saying is that the difference between what I'm saying and the flight is that there could be like the break, just breaking that will to live, and the person just completely gives up. There is no flight or fight. Right. It's like that is possible. But the Zion represents that inner force of life that is willing to amass all the power that it has in order to continue its existence. Zion hanimshach me'mitziuto mikoach hachayim hapnimi shel hayud. Right, so he's highlighting this idea that the Zion, right, the leg of the Zion, it comes down from the center as opposed to the side of the Vav, which alludes to the fact that it's drawing down from like the center, the innermost power of life. If we talked about so he emphasizes again, and we spoke about this a little bit a second ago, that there has to be an association with a higher purpose in order to have the moral clarity necessary to wage war. And that goes on to that I'm realizing now as I'm speaking, that goes to the point that we also said a second ago, that right, we spoke about this idea of like the moral clarity, like to identify something as bad. So in order to identify something as bad, you first have to have the belief in the inherent goodness of your own existence. Right? If you don't have the inherent understanding of the goodness of your own existence, then there's no awakening to fight. Yeah. If you've been demoralized, right? then you have no will to fight. What's demoralization? You don't believe in the essential goodness of your own existence, which is very sad. Yeah. So like the Zion represents the awareness of the inherent good of your own existence. And that is what's being represented by the fact that the leg of the Zion, the drawing down of the Zion, is coming from the center. Because you're centered in the sense that you recognize the eichut, the quality source from which you emanate. So if a person recognizes that and they say, no, it is actually good that I exist. It wasn't a mistake that I exist. And and the fact that I exist is good, and therefore I should fight for my own existence. So if a person could be, God forbid, demoralized to the point where they don't actually believe that, and then they don't have any will to fight. But ideally, they should remember the consciousness of the Zion, which is that you are an emanation from the supernal Yud, the supernal quality of up above, and therefore it's worth fighting for yourself.
Evil has no problem with it.
Huh?
Evil has no problem with it.
Right. It's very often that the person that believes this the most wins. Yes. Yes.
It seems like also the Eichus is also on the whatever thing Mafreya. So we've got in a more mundane situation, it's like I'm sitting here learning, I've got thoughts nudging at me, or I've got my children nudging at me, right? I don't want to I want to war on my thoughts, right? Those thoughts I want to get rid of. My children, I want to do that too. So the Eichus of them, I need to figure out the quality of the attacking forces at work and deal with it appropriate, right? In other words, I need to be kind to my children.
Right.
I can't just it's whatever, however I work that. So whereas the thoughts or whatever.
Right. You're bringing up a good point. Not all kochot hamafriya, that as using Rav Kook's terms, not all of the mafriya, the disrupting forces, are equal.
Are equal.
Meaning, there's a difference between your kids, bothering you a little bit too much, and God forbid, an enemy attacking you. Right? It's not the same thing.
The yud of the quality is above that, so that I can kind of take an objective look at my children.
I hear you. Yes, that's it.
I'm not talking.
No. I hear what you're saying. You're saying that contained within this idea that the Zion emanates from supernal quality, and if a person connects to that idea of supernal quality, it gives them an objective perspective on the situation that they're in, right? And who's attacking you, right? Like what the nature of the mafriya is, so you can deal with it accordingly. Like you're not going to deal with, God forbid, a terrorist in the same way that you're going to deal with, like an annoying neighbor. It's not right. It's not the same thing.
Insurance
salesman. What? Insurance salesman, exactly. Yeah. So this was the point that I wanted to share with everyone. At the end of here, we do have a few minutes to finish this up. So there's a parak in Sefer Yeshayahu, which I think is objectively the most famous chapter in Yeshayahu, in Parak Beis. Parak Beis of Yeshayahu. Okay? So, the reason why it's so famous is because there's actually a pasuk from here carved into the entrance to the United Nations building in New York City. So how does it start off? It says, "Vayabach haris hayamim." It will be in the pinnacle of history. The mountain of God will be right, and the house of God will be above all the other mountains. V'nisa migvaos, and will be uplifted from all the other hills. V'na'aru elav kol hagoyim, and all the nations will be directed to them. They will all flow to this mountain. They will all want to come to this mountain. V'holchu amim rabim, and many nations will come. V'amaru, and they will say, L'chu v'na'aleh el har Hashem. Let us go up to the mountain of God. El beis Elohei Yaakov, to the house of the God of Yaakov. V'yoreinu midrachav, and he will tell us of his ways. V'nolcha ba'or chosav, and we will walk in his pathways. Ki mitzion teitzei Torah udvar Adonai miYerushalayim, because instruction will come out from Zion and the word of God from Jerusalem. V'shafat bein hagoyim, and God will make judgment between the nations. V'ochiach lamim rabim, and provide rebuke and guidance to all the nations. V'chitetu charvosam le'itim, and they will beat their swords into pruning things. V'chanisoseim lemazmeros, and the mazmeros are the pruning things. Itim are the plows. They will beat their swords into plows. V'chanisoseim, and their spears into pruning sticks. Lo yisagoy el goy charev lo yilmedu od milchama, and no nation will lift a sword against each other, and they will not learn of war again. You see what this prophecy, this is the part that's written in the United Nations. Just a brief line on that because it's actually important to what we're saying. Okay. So one by one. Do you see what's being said over here? The elements of war, the cherev and the chanis, the sword and the spear, are being turned into what? The elements of bringing food. You hear what's being said? This is a very powerful, this is literal, it's like the same koach in the world, okay? Now that everything is great and we have the Beis HaMikdash and God is judging everyone and teaching everyone Torah, you can now transfer the weapons to making food. All right? That's what's being said here. Now the thing, and this is actually important to highlight, like the reason why. I mean, you could probably say this is what underlies all the dysfunction of globalist organizations like the UN. And the UN is like Omed Barosham, that they skip to the end of this whole thing, right? Perek Daled is v'chitetu chavosem leitim mechanisosem lemazmeros. But what's the pasuk right before that? V'holchu amin rabim v'amaru l'chu v'na'aleh al har Adonai al beis Elohei Yaakov. Let's go up to the house of God and to the mountain of the God of Jacob, and let's learn Torah, and everything's going to be great. And then afterwards, after we're done with the Daf Yomi Shir, then we'll beat our swords into plowshares, right? They skip the whole. They don't understand. This is how if you aim for utopia, you're not going to get utopia. If you go according to the Seder that the Navi is telling you to go through, then you have hope of getting to this utopian vision of the swords becoming the plowshares. So you see the progression over here? This is really up because you have to understand it for the next part, which is even more crazy. That Yeshayahu is saying that what's going to happen is going to be the Beis HaMikdash, the center of divine knowledge in the world, and everyone's going to want to come to partake of this divine knowledge. And they're going to come, and they're going to be so inspired that they're going to take their elements of war and turn them into tools of providing food and sustenance. That's the order that he's talking about. Okay? When did Yeshayahu HaNavi live? Yeshayahu had an 80-year-long, let's say, career of being a prophet. Very long. Right? He starts in the time, the first pasuk of Sefer Yeshayahu. Chazon Yeshayahu b'nei Uziyahu Yosam Achaz Chizkiyahu. So he lives through the reign of 4 kings, which is quite a long time. Okay, Chizkiyahu is already he sees the Assyrian invasion of Israel, which is the banishment of the 10 northern tribes. So he sees that. He sees the Judean kingdom at its peak, and he sees the near collapse. Okay, that's Yeshayahu's career. There's another prophet in the very next generation. Okay, the prophet called Yoel. Now, in the Seder Olam Rabbah, let's take a step back. Yoel is one of the prophets that we don't know anything about him. Usually when a prophet starts off, when the book of the prophet starts off, it says, these are the visions of so-and-so who lived during this time and in this place, and this is who he's speaking to. It gives a proper introduction. There are a few prophets where it doesn't say any of that. Okay, Yoel is an example, Habakkuk is another example. We don't know when these people lived, who they were talking to, nothing. We don't have any context at all. But in the Seder Olam Rabbah, it says that Yoel was speaking, he prophesied in the reign of Menashe. Who was Menashe? The wicked son of Chizkiyahu, which was the last king that Yeshayahu was speaking to. Okay? The Rambam, interestingly, in the introduction to Yad HaChazaka, the Rambam provides an incredible line of chronology where he lists literally Ish Achar Ish, the line of the Masorah. So Moshe to Yoshua, Yoshua to Pinchas, and Pinchas to Eli, to Shmuel, to David. He is the whole line. Who was the Talmud of who? All the way down to the Amoraim. Fascinating. Now, he says, Amos, the prophet Amos was the teacher of Yeshayahu. Yeshayahu had a disciple named Micha, who was also one of the 12 so-called minor prophets. And Micha's disciple was Yoel. So Yoel is literally the generation right after. If we look in the Navi Micha, by the way, Micha is speaking to the same people. He's also from the same area, from Yehuda, from a city called Morisha, which is in this area. It's south of Jerusalem. It's a Judean city called Morisha. So Micha is speaking in the same time as Yeshayahu. Yoel is in the very next generation. So he's speaking at a time where things are not good. Chizkiyahu is like the super tzaddik that the Gemara in Sanhedrin says Chizkiyahu could have been the Mashiach. He's like this super king. The pasuk says explicitly that there was like no greater king than Chizkiyahu since David. He was like the guy, okay? And then his son Menashe is just the total opposite. He's like this like cartoon character villain, like killing everyone left and right, just totally corrupt, not a good guy, okay? So Yoel is speaking in this time in history, whereas Yeshayahu, things were relatively nice, okay? They had a few, speed bumps along the way. The whole Assyrian invasion thing wasn't so nice, but like basically things are relatively good, okay? And then in the next generation, things just go off a cliff, okay? So this is the generation where Yoel is speaking.
Doesn't this mean we do have context for Yoel?
What?
Doesn't this mean we do have?
No, I said that the book doesn't say explicitly what the context is.
Right.
In Masorah, Chazal fill in a few of the blanks for us, and the Rambam seems to take that literally and says like this is actually the historical progression of how it played out. But in the actual book, it just opens up and like jumps right into it. Doesn't say who he is, where he is, or when. So this is in Perek Dalet of Sefer Yoel. The book only has 4 chapters. This is the last chapter of Sefer Yoel. So he says, Ki hine yamim ba'im hahema uvaisahi asher ashuv es Yehuda v'Yerushalayim. This is what it's going to look like when I bring back all the exiles from Yehuda and Yerushalayim. The kibatzti es kol hagoyim. I will gather in all of the nations. V'aradatim el emek Yehoshaphat. And I will bring them to the valley of Yehoshaphat. Where's the valley of Yehoshaphat? If you're by Mamila going down the hill, so the walls of the old city are on your left, and then eventually you get on the right-hand side, there's like this sharp decline, like the road that goes around the wall, so there's this big valley over there. That's Emek Yehoshaphat. So I will bring all the people to the valley of Yehoshaphat. I'll bring all the goyim to the valley of Yehoshaphat. V'nishpatati imam, and I will judge them. Alami, on the matter of my nation, v'nachalasi Yisrael, and on my heritage Israel, asher pizru bagoyim, that they, the goyim, threw them into exile. Ves artzi chileku, and that they divided up my land. Just to insert this, God is going to come and judge people for exiling the Jewish people and trying to divide up the land. When God comes to judge the people for trying to divide the land, you don't want to be in that group. Don't be in the group of people that are being judged because they tried to divide the land. Don't divide the land. Ve'elami yadu goral, and they made a goral, like a lottery on my people, meaning like to carve them up, like to carve up the Jewish people. Who's going to get this part? Who's going to get that part? Vayitnu ayelet bazona, and they sold the male child to a prostitute. V'hayilda machru bayayin, and the small girls they sold for a bottle of wine. V'gam ma'atem li Tzur v'Tzidon. What have you done to me, Tzur and Sidon, which is Lebanon? Okay, Tzur and Sidon is Lebanon. The whole Glilos Palashas, and all of the environs of the Philistines, Gaza. Hagmul atem mishalmim alai, this horrible gmul. We spoke about the word gmul, right? And it was gimel. This measurement that you have measured out to me, right? This thing that you have done to me. V'im gomlim atem alai, this thing that you have done to me. Kal mehera ashiv gemulchem beroshechem. This will come back onto your own heads. Asher kaspiu za'avi lekachtem. You squandered me. You took all my riches. U'machmadai atovim be'esem leichalchem, and you stole all my stuff. Uvnei Yehuda v'nei Yerushalayim mechartem livnei Yevonim. You sold all of my children into slavery. Okay, so this is right. God is going to judge all the nations for doing all these horrible calamities to the Jewish people. Okay, specifically Tzur and Sidon, Lebanon, and Glilos Palashas, all the environs of Gaza. Okay, continuing on. This is Pasuk Tes. Kiru zos bagoyim kadshu milchama. Call this out to the nations and declare war. Ha'iru agiborim, awaken the warriors. Yigshu ya'alu kol anshei hamilchama, and all of the men of war will come. Kitu itechem lacharevos. You should make your plows into swords. Umazmirosechem leramachim, and your pruning staves into spears. Hachalash yomar gibor ani, and even the weak ones will declare, I am a mighty warrior. You understand how this is literally the exact opposite of what Yeshayahu says? Meaning his Rebbe's Rebbe spoke about a time in history where they're going to take the swords and beat them into plowshares. He's saying, no, get the plowshares out, take anything you can make into an improvised weapon, and get ready to fight. Hasuvo kol hagoyim misaviv v'nikbatzu, and all the nations will gather in to come to fight you. Shama hinachas Hashem gidorecha, and there God will establish all of your heroes in order to fight against them. I'm skipping just a few verses. Right, there's a few verses that describe the armies of the Gentile nations coming and trying to wage war against the Jewish people. Okay. Ki karov yom Hashem be'emek hecharutz, because the day of God bringing judgment in this valley, the valley of Yehoshaphat, is coming. I mean, He's going to come. He's going to judge the nations in this valley. V'Hashem mitzion yishag, and God will roar from Jerusalem. U'miyushalayim yitin kolo, and from the city He will give forth His voice. V'rashu shamayim ba'aretz, and the heavens and the earth will shake. V'Hashem mechasel la'amo, God will be a covering, a protection for His people. U'ma'oz livnei Yisrael, and strength for the children of Israel. V'haya b'yom hahu. I'm sorry, I'm looking for a specific verse over here. Right. V'haya b'yom hahu. Yetsu mayim chayim miyushalayim. There will be the waters. Umayan mi beis Hashem yetzei. There will be flowing waters that will come out of the house of God. V'hishka es nachal Shittim, and they will irrigate the wadi of Shittim. Mitzrayim l'shmama tiyeh. Egypt will be completely desolate. Ve'edom l'midbar shmama, and the Edomites will also be desolate. Mechamas b'nei Yehuda asher shavchu dam naki ba'artzam. From all of the aggression and violence that the Judeans will bring upon them in payment for the fact that they spilled all of this innocent blood. Meaning the Edomites and the Egyptians spilled all the innocent blood, so the children of Judea will come and get vengeance for them. Yehuda le'olam tishev, and the Judeans will be established forever. Yerushalayim l'dor dorim, and Jerusalem for all generations. V'ni kesi damlam loni kesi, and I will not cleanse the enemies of the Jewish people from the blood that they spilled. Hashem Shochem b'Tzion, and God will dwell eternally in Yerushalayim. This is literally the opposite order of Yerushalayim that we saw in Yeshayahu. Yeshayahu describes there's going to be a temple, and because of the incredible inspiration of the temple, people are going to take all their weapons and just make them into implements of food creating. Because there's no reason for weapons anymore. This is the exact opposite. It's going to be this tremendous, tremendous crisis that's going to cause all people to take their implements of food making, make them into weapons in order to fight a war which is going to be triggered by all the nations coming in to destroy the Jewish people. And as a result of that, after that's over, the flowing waters will emanate out from Jerusalem in order to irrigate the valley of Shittim. What is this valley of Shittim? Says Rashi, the valley of Shittim, ma shechatu bashittim, that which the Jewish people sinned in Shittim. Who knows what that's referring to? What is the sinning in the Shittim? No, not Atzei Shittim, the place called Shittim. Where is that incident? As the end of Parashas Balak, when the Jewish people sinned with Benos Moab, which results in this horrible plague. Right? It's the biggest plague. It's the biggest calamity in the Midbar. Right? The incident of Shittim. And why is it called Shittim? It's called Shittim not just because that was the name of the place, but to allude to the element of, as Chazal say in the Gemara in Sota, shtus, of insanity. Ein adam chota elin kein nichnas beruach shtus. And a person sins only if a spirit of insanity enters him. And there's a type of insanity that takes over a person when he's able to veer off course like that. So these waters that will come out from the house of God will irrigate that place of Shittim, that place of complete psycho-spiritual detachment that allows someone to go into insanity. Right? The insanity that caused you to sin will be healed. The insanity that caused you to sin will be healed. I want you to think about this. This is very powerful. The entire country right now, pe'echad, all the spectrums of the whole full gamut of the political spectrum. Everyone is talking about this idea of the conceptia, the conception, the mistaken conceptions, these paradigms, these thought processes that we had that were so wrong, they couldn't be more wrong if you tried. If you tried to contrive a picture of reality more skewed, you couldn't think of one that was more skewed than this. Right? This is the Shittim. This is what Shittim means. It's a perception of reality which is so off that you are not only are you not able to navigate the world, but you quickly learn, right, through unfortunate pain and suffering, how off you were. So the Ma'ayan mi Beit Hashem, these healing waters that come from the temple, will irrigate that, meaning they'll provide a correction for that. And this is the process. The process is that we see the enemies coming in, and people say, we got to do something to fight, so let's take all the implements that are meant to make food and let's make them into weapons, and they win the war, and then the Beis HaMikdash comes and spreads out the healing waters, and we're all healed from our insanity. Sounds great to me. Right? This is right? And obviously the relevance to what we're talking about now is that it's this koach, the koach of lechem and lacham, of bread and sustenance, can quickly be shifted to fighting wars if it needs to be. This yearning for life, this aspiration, shifat ha'chaim, as Rav Kook says, the aspiration for life can be shifted in a moment's notice. If the people are healthy, right, if the Am has fundamental health, it can quickly be shifted into the impetus to fight. And Bezrat Hashem, when, right, as Yeshayahu tells us, when we have our established sense of self, and the Beis HaMikdash is at the epicenter, not just of our consciousness, but at the consciousness of the whole world, then things can revert back to their more healthy form, that the weapons can then go back to the elements of providing food and sustenance. Right? But it's the same koach. The same koach that provides food and sustenance, that gives the sustenance of life, can be shifted to war, and Bezrat Hashem they will be shifted back to providing sustenance. We should merit to see this speedily in our days. Yishar koach.
Is there a contradiction between the two prophecies, or are there two pathways that you can choose?
I don't think there's a contradiction at all. I think that in light of what we're explaining, I think that it's honing in on literally this thing. It's the same force. It's the same force that's buried within the consciousness of the individual and the collective, that ideally, it should be focused into sustenance and providing food and increasing the quality of life. But if there's a crisis, it could be used in fighting. So Yeshayahu doesn't talk about a war. Yeshayahu is just saying, like, this is what it's going to look like. It's going to look like the basically just going to be at the center, and all the nations want to come. No. So that's the other opposite. That Yeshayahu is the opposite of Yoel. Yoel is describing all the goyim coming in to fight. Yeshayahu is describing all the goyim coming in to take part in the Beis HaMikdash. That's right. That's what he's saying.
Which one? Is it a sequential, or is it?
I mean, both of them can take place. I mean, he's describing two events that are completely different. So I don't know, why are they mutually exclusive? I mean, one can come before the other, obviously, right? I mean, one or.
Sounds like if they're coming to fight, we're going to destroy them, and then you're going to say whoever's.
That's the vision of Yoel. The vision of Yoel. I want to emphasize this again. All of the elements in Yeshayahu are there in Yoel in literally opposite order. Right. With Yeshayahu, it's Beis HaMikdash, goyim coming in, and the plowshare sword thing. Right. With Yoel, it's the exact opposite. It's the goyim coming in to fight. The plowshare is turning into swords, and then the Beis HaMikdash shows up. Yeah, so I think you could say, I think the simplest explanation is that the vision of Yoel precedes the vision of Yeshayahu. Right, the story that Yoel is talking about this war that will be fought by the nation successfully, and then the Beis HaMikdash showing up, that precedes the vision of Yeshayahu, and then the story of Yeshayahu plays out.
You're saying the survivors of this war, of those who are attacking us, will then seek to go.
Correct.
Would it also be two scenarios?
There's no introduction to this. There's very little context to the story of Yeshayahu. Like Yeshayahu just kind of jumps in. The very beginning of Perek Beis is like, on that day, in Achris Hayamim, so this is what it's going to look like. He doesn't say like how it comes about. He just says like, this is the picture. Where Yoel he has like a whole narrative. He's like, there's been these nations that have been harassing the Jewish people forever, and they've been, stealing from them and kidnapping them and killing them, etc., etc. And eventually, it's going to come to a head, and there's going to be a war, and this is how it's going to play out. So,
is it possible that they're both true in that one or the other history could unfold either way, and it depends on the consciousness of people at that time?
I think you're asking a more general question right now. Is like, which is basically, are the negative prophecies are they already predetermined? Do they have to play out, or are we able to be saved from them? So, Chazal talk about this. They say that the negative prophecies don't have to play out. They could be avoided, right? Like the Gemara in Sanhedrin says right? I mean, this is the most famous one, right? Be'ita chishena, which is a pasuk from Yeshayahu. That right? It could right the Mashiach could, or the redemption could come right in its own time, or it can come more speedily, right? Depending on the merits of the people. So there's all right there is some optionality depending on our actions. We do have agency to affect how these things play out.
In terms of the prophecy, it's the same.
But I don't think that they're mutual. I don't think that they're inherently mutually exclusive. I think that both can theoretically play out. I think that that's what I think that they're. I think that it's alluding to that. I think that it's saying like it's like they almost form like a chiasm of sorts. That Yoel is before, and then it's like Yoel ends where Yeshayahu starts. If that makes sense. Like Yoel's story ends where Yeshayahu's picture begins.
Which actually makes sense.
The Rebbe to be bigger than the Chassid. Right. I hear you. Of course, to be fair, Yoel isn't experiencing. The opposite. Yeshayahu did not experience the level of crisis that Yoel experienced. Like Yoel is living in a tyrannical world of Menashe, which the reign of Menashe was very long. I think it was actually the longest of all the Judean kings. He reigned for 55 years, which is very long. It's longer than even David. David reigned for 40 years. So yeah, it's like he was experiencing like a lot of very difficult things. So it's kind of natural that he would be talking about this level of crisis. Yeah, and like responding to a crisis, responding to like a very serious situation. Where Yeshayahu, he's able to look to the future. He's able to give the nechama. He's able to give the message of solace. Tov, Yishar Koch.